So I grew up watching the original Flash, the 90s series and everything like that. And when I was a kid, I'm like maybe like 8, 9 years old, and I thought it was one of the coolest things ever. I mean, it was just amazing because it brought it to the TV series. I was used to the superhero movies. I'm like, wow, I could watch this once a week. That's incredible. So to me, it was really, really awesome. And so thank you ahead of time for just the performance that you were able to put on there.
Thanks.
A question though. So you originally started out doing soap operas, right? And then. So how was it that, how did that feel having your fan base after the 90s go from like 60-year-old women right down to like the teenagers?
I'll tell you, it's amazing because actually the first thing that I did that was signaled the end of my waiting tables career, which is still, if there's anybody out here who waits tables, my hat's off to you. It's the most terrifying job I've ever had. I don't have Broadway nightmares, but I have all the food's coming up in the kitchen and I forget what tables it goes to. I still have those nightmares. But it was, I'm in addition to being the classic Flash, which makes me feel like a 1964 Cadillac. But I did Showtime's first original movie that they produced. It was the Best of Off-Broadway series, and it was called The Dirtiest Show in Town by Tom Ian.
Oh, wow.
And then I went right into Guiding Light. The fun thing about being on daytime in the early 80s was it was the youth revolution. Mm-hmm. It was Luke and Laura. It was the guy who did that story came over to do the same thing for Guiding Light. My dressing roommate was Kevin Bacon. I then went to, so you're all now what, 2 degrees of Kevin, is that how that works?
That's exactly, 2 degrees now.
And then I went to As the World Turns and did a story for which I won my first Emmy opposite Julianne Moore. So I mean, those were great days to be in daytime. So it was a really young audience.
Okay.
College was really a young audience, and then I did The Flash, and that was a young audience, and then I did Dawson's Creek, and that was a young audience, and now I'm doing Flash again, and that's a young audience. And then I pass a mirror. I'm like, whoa! I'm the only one getting older. It's amazing. And now Dawson's Creek is coming on to Hulu, so that's going to be introduced to a whole another audience. It's kind of great.
And it's going to kick too, because that crowd's going to eat it up, and you're going to have this whole new fan base as well from there.
Yeah.
If you're already establishing with Flash, the newer Flash now, Flash 2.0, we'll call it for the sake of confusion. Now, how does that feel though? You coming on stage now, they come to you. We want you to play the Flash's dad. Yeah. Here you are, the original Flash, and now you're playing a Henry Allen. So how do you, essentially go from being the Flash to now being a supporter of the Flash?
Absolutely. Well, I'd be a really pathetic human being if I thought that 25 years later they were going to come and ask me to be the Flash. I would be really delusional, But it's a natural progression. I represented as the Flash, thanks to you people, this audience right here, for 24 years. With the Flash being successful, even though we went one season and then the DVDs came out in 2006, it had a whole nother life. The loyalty of the fans and the fan appreciation for that show still blows my mind. The reaction of the fan base when it was announced that I would be on the new show completely caught me off guard. Jeff Johns came up to me and said, see, yeah, I bet you're surprised. And so it was a great thing. But it's a funny thing. People often wonder, they don't quite want to ask it.
Right.
I'm glad you did. About, as an actor, how do you handle coming in and being a supporting player on a show where you were the star? And if there are any young actors, I would say that where I put my ego as an actor is whatever role I'm doing right now. And my ego is not around whether I was in the red suit or not. Thank God I'm not. We'll talk about that later. But it's around how well can I play Henry Allen. And the value of my being on the new Flash right now, beyond the stunt aspect. I mean, yeah, great. Old Flash is on the new Flash. That's a great stunt. But Henry Allen is a great character. I would want to play Henry Allen had I never played Barry Allen. The fact that I played Barry Allen helps me play Henry Allen better because I've been in the suit and I know the rigors of carrying that kind of a show, you know. And almost in a way, the fact that we got huge critical success. Our reviews were through the roof. We just missed the popular success that we hoped to have. So coming into this, meeting Grant, admiring his work as I do, and him as a human being, people say, what's Grant like? I said, look at him on television. What you see is what you get. You know, there's no acting. He's a very sincere guy. But, you know, going into this, my hope for him and my wish for him was that he would have the popular success that we just missed. And it sort of is a paternal feeling that I have, you know, really enjoying him having it. So I would say to anyone who wants to have longevity over a career, and I've been working now for 36 years professionally in this business, is you make it, you invest your ego in how well can I play this part right now.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely, absolutely. Going back to the original, you said you just made, you know, almost made the success for the first one. And you know, again, I don't know what went on backstage or anything or in the studios, but I always felt that it was a technology issue. Had you had the technology to make The Flash what they have now, it would have been a more successful show. I think the times were the biggest enemy of the 91 series. I don't know what your input would be on that. Yeah,
well, we were sort of at the beginning, at the sort of cutting edge of the whole, right before it caught on. I mean, everyone who's been a comic book fan for their whole life, I have a buddy who was a comic book fan when it wasn't cool to be a geek. And right now he's like, yeah, you know, you all came late to the party. I've been there all along. In 1990, we did have what you're talking about. Back in 2015 in the spring, Mark Hamill, the producers of the old show, Andrew Kreisberg from the new show, the technical people from both show, we screened the two Trickster episodes, original Trickster episodes at a theater in Los Angeles, and we had a Q&A afterwards, and I learned a lot listening to the technical people talk about how hard it was and how experimental it was back in 1990 to try to get the effects. And then to hear Andrew Kreisberg say some of the effects that they're now using were pioneered on our show a quarter of a century ago.
Right.
Oh my God, did I just say that? And it was expensive.
Right.
You know, it was so expensive because we had to do practical effects. We didn't have the possibility of doing so much in post-production. It actually took us 9 days per episode, 2 units shooting simultaneously. I would be shuttled back and forth between units to get one episode. And we were always massive amounts of overtime. Now they shoot an episode in 8 days and they have a longer post. What that gives them is something that we struggled with through our season. We were, I think, pretty successfully did like a 1-hour movie every week. What we missed and what was essential, I think, for series television is you gotta have storylines. You gotta have relationships that tease and go through the whole series. You got to know where you want Barry and Iris, for example, in the new show, where you want them to end up that season, and what are the obstacles and how are they going to get there. That we didn't have the time that we needed. Tina and Barry would flirt one episode, and then Joyce Heiser would come in. Thank God, I can't regret that. And for another episode, and then we'd be friends, and then we'd flirt again, and I'd go, okay, what is the deal with Barry and Tina? And they, I'd say, it's serialized drama. Yeah, it's action adventure, and if that doesn't work, roll up your tents and go home. But if you're going to keep audiences coming back to back, you've got to have that through line. One thing that I'm so gratified about the new show is I've had a lot of guys come up and say, my girlfriend, who is not a comic book fan, did not want to watch this show, and she's into it. And it's because they're concentrating on the characters, they're concentrating on the relationships, the romance is there. Andrew Kreisberg said they have 3 words up in the writer's room, none of which I can remember. So, but it goes something like this. It's got to have adventure, fun, and heart. And they've spent a lot of, and my great privilege has been to come in and be part of the heart of those episodes. I asked Jeff Johns, I said, Henry Allen's a surgeon. What kind of surgeon is he? And he shot back, he said, a heart surgeon, like he's the heart of the show. And, and that's why I'm so glad to be playing that part. A lot of people said Jay Garrick, and that would have been the obvious choice. But I think given the conflicted Allen storyline, father wrongfully convicted of killing his wife in front of 10-year-old Barry. Barry's the only person in that world who believes he's innocent. Even his friend Joe doesn't believe he's innocent. That immediately sets up an intimacy between Henry and Barry that's quite unique from the rest of the show. And they've utilized it greatly. When Barry needs to let it all fall down, he comes to Henry, or last season he did. Particularly. So it's been a great thing to play. And in that sense, everything that I feel about Grant taking on the part, everything I feel about having been all of this show, all of the unfulfilled hopes that I had for the first show that are now being fulfilled on the second, that all feeds right in to the scenes that Grant and I do. People said, do you rehearse? No. Do you run the scenes? No. We come in knowing the lines, we camera block it, and we just do the scenes because the homework's done for us, by virtue of the fact that I played the role that he's playing now. So
you get more of a father bond that even maybe the writers didn't even really realize, just because of that shared bond between the two of you.
They wrote it beautifully, and they've communicated to me that they were amazed at what they got back. But part of that is just good casting. Take me out of the picture.
Right.
Anyone whose ego is in the right. Now, if I had been an egomaniac, if I had been resentful because it's not my show anymore, if I had come in with an attitude, it could have been a recipe for disaster. I could have been a real disruptive influence. But, any actor that will take on the new role and use it and channel it into what's happening right now, it just was very smart casting. And I used to tell people who were disappointed that I wasn't Jay Garrick, I said, I know why you're disappointed. I said, because you want the passing of the torch. I said, I promise you, you will get it. It'll be in the terms of a father-son blessing, but you'll get it. And I've heard from so many fans on Twitter and Facebook, social media, and they said you were so right, so.
Right.
It's been great.
It has been, and with getting that, and getting that, having the character with what happened, there's kind of a controversy about it, about how everything kind of went down. There's a little bit of controversy, but how has the controversy affected you in terms of how you react to it? What's the level of it? And what does it inform you as a person?
What do you mean, the controversy in terms of?
As far as with Henry and
how he left town?
Right, yes.
Yeah, I got the script. First of all, I have no interest in being there every week. I think it would also, it would do a disservice both to Grant and the show to have the guy who played the Flash every week looking over his shoulder. Furthermore, what am I going to be doing? I don't want to be sitting on the couch in my underwear eating pizza and drinking beer and saying, "What, are you going to the crime lab today, Bear?" That would do a disservice to the character I created 25 years ago. Having said that, we knew once Henry got out of town, got out of jail, we would have to find a reason to get him out of town. The fact that they did it in the first script, in the middle of his coming home party, I called Andrew because we went through several versions. One version was Henry wanted to go around and see the world because Nora got to see the world and Henry didn't. I said, okay, are you telling me that Henry Allen is a jerk? I said, because I can play that. I can totally play that. I have. Both of my Emmys are for psychopaths. I tell people my specialties are superheroes and psychopaths.
That fine line.
He said, but I said, we've created this relationship. We've created what Andrew wanted. He always wanted, he even resisted me being angry at Joe. When I said, no, I got to have some anger at Joe when he comes to the prison and admits now he knows he's been wrong. I can't just forgive him like that. So we hit a happy medium. And we worked on it. I said, Henry, rightly or wrongly, unless there's a darker motivation, and I keep planting those seeds because I'm hoping there is, but if there isn't, I said, Henry's got to believe that on some level it's what's best for Barry. I'll tell you what, people were so shocked by that. I mean, people were, not just to me, I was reading on social media that people went, it took them out of the story. They were throwing things at the screen. What do you mean? What the hell? You're leaving town. And I said, yeah, so it's a shock. So go back and watch the scene again. What I came up with was, okay, the episode is all about Barry can't be who Barry needs to be around the people he loves the most because they get hurt. So he's isolating through the whole episode. Bless his heart, his dad gets out of jail. He's willing to throw everything he knows over. We're going to be roommates. We're going to have movie night. We're going to, Henry knows better. And so, he doesn't want to discuss it at the party. I put in there that Henry's like, no, it's a party. No, let's don't talk about it, which immediately makes him suspicious. And he pins Henry literally in a corner. And they initially had me tell him that he couldn't be everything he needed to be with me there. I said, what if I ask him? What if Henry almost hopes that when I ask him, can you be everything you need to be with me here? What if Henry is hoping that Barry will say, yes, I can, please stay? But he doesn't. Barry says, he hems and haws and he says, well, you're the only family I have left. And I look right over here and Joe's standing right here. So Henry sees then that his path is pretty clear. Now, the results on that's the best we could do. The reviews on that were mixed. I had one blogger called Henry the most selfish father in television. I mean, on the nose of it, you can't even get through your welcome home party. I mean, your son spent his whole life getting you exonerated, and now you announce through your. And I told Andrew, even when we came up with the version we thought we could sell, I said, Andrew, we're not going to get away with this. I said, people, we're going to get clocked, even if we do this well. He said, I know, but he's like, we've gone through 6 versions in the writer's room, and every time someone will go, really? So those are the kinds of things. You try to invest as much truth as you can in what you're given to do. And having said that, I only want to come back when it's important that I be there. It was very important that I, John Wesley Shipp, be there first season. Andrew Kreisberg, Greg Berlanti, they've all told me we couldn't have done it without you. Grafting the still very loyal audience onto the new show, passing it off to Grant. That's been done now, and he's flying high. So they don't really need me to be there. Whenever they have something important for me to do, I'll be happy to come back. But I don't want to just be sitting around, for the sake of sitting around. Did I answer your question?
No, I think you did fantastically, yes.
You definitely did.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah.
I think they're all very happy with that answer. Well, it's now time to give the questions to the people, and you're going to give the questions to the people as you'd like to do. He's going to come to you guys.
By God, yes. Yes, sir. My friend.
How you doing, John?
How are you, buddy?
Good, good. I'm seeing you again.
Good to see you, man.
So, first let me tell you something. So I met John last year at Dragon Con.
Oh,
and
it's a roast.
No. And I've been coming to these type of events for a long time. You see, I'm a little old. And let me tell you something. This man is the best celebrity that I've ever met. He is. tremendous. Very personable, fantastic. Anyway, so my question.
Yes, sir.
So in preparing for this day, I watched all 22 episodes of your series.
Oh my God!
Okay.
I don't think I've watched it.
So the Trickster episodes were probably my favorites, the two of them, right? Which the third or the fourth, and the last one was the Trickster, right? So they're probably my favorites. But there was something interesting about the show that it appeared that it took place in the 1990s, because that's when the show came out, but many of the cars were classic cars of the 50s and the 60s, right? I mean, was there a reason for that? I mean, 'cause, okay.
We have is the art student who I talked, or art teacher, there was an art teacher earlier who came up and I met earlier. No? So he's not here. That was intentional. That was the art design. Remember, this was right at the turn of the decade. Right. And they wanted it to look like 50s and 60s meets 90s. Right. As though the 70s and 80s had never happened, which I don't know if that was because of the age of the people. None of us could remember the 70s and 80s, because we were busy elsewhere during the 70s and 80s. But that was the art design, and we were actually nominated for an Emmy for art direction. The wonderful mural artists that they got, the big murals, and so they wanted to create a world that was classic, that in terms of the comic book, and yet also forward-looking. And man, we were finding locations because the buildings, the architecture had to exclude those decades. So we were always in some. I mean, it was wild because these deco buildings aren't always in the best areas of town. I mean, man, at 4 o'clock in the morning, we'd be laying boards down in an alley over needles and human feces and. 4 o'clock in the morning so that we could get an upward shot and get the top of an Art Deco building. But they really went to great lengths to keep that consistent. And that goes along the lines that people were saying. We were talking about the whole speed thing. Obviously, if someone could go that fast, there would be no show because everything would be possible and nothing would be seen. Right. But along with the art direction, a show sets the universe and the limits and the rules of its universe. And as long as you don't violate your rules that you've set up for that universe, the audience will go with you.
So just a couple more things. So you had talked about the special effects in the 90s. I would argue that the biggest problem, because the show, in my mind, was probably one of the best one-season shows ever. But I think being opposite the Bill Cosby show, and many of you are probably too young to remember, but that was a powerhouse back then on Thursdays, and then The Simpsons. So I think the timing was probably, the time slot probably didn't favor, the show at the time. Right. So, and then one last thing, I hope you don't get mad at me.
I won't.
But next week is his birthday.
No!
So let's join me in wishing him a happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear John. Happy birthday to you.
Thanks, man. Thank you, guys. I certainly didn't expect that. A quick note. Grant's, for those of you who know, Grant's birthday was 2 days ago. Jesse Martin's birthday is 2 days from now. My birthday is 4 days after that. Grant and I were both born in Norfolk, Virginia, and he was born the year I was doing The Flash. So how's that for some coincidences? Yes, sir.
Are we going to be seeing you in the new season?
Are you going to be seeing me in the new season? You mean the second half of this season? I don't think I'll get in trouble if I tell you yes. Yeah. Excuse me 1 minute. I have some very dear friends back here, and I have to take a personal moment. How you doing, guys? Good to see you. Good to see you. Hey, I'm so glad you made it.
This is our cousin. We happen to.
Hi.
This is my boyfriend.
Hey, man. How are you? It's good to see you guys. Thanks for coming.
And for you guys who may not know, like the way John is right now this is John. Like if you've walked past him at his booth, he's out. He's not in his booth. He's outside his table talking to everybody that walks by. He's the nicest person we've ever met in a convention.
That's why I scared that girl in the front row. Okay, let me see. Let me come around here. I see someone in a familiar T-shirt.
What's your favorite thing and least favorite thing about being about being the Flash before?
About being the Flash before or
Yeah.
being the... Okay.
Yeah.
All right. My least favorite thing was the suit. I'm sure that comes as a big surprise to everyone. No, it was just, first of all, may I just have a disclaimer. Nobody wants to hear someone who has been blessed with the opportunity to play a superhero stand up and whine about all the difficulties they had in the suit, okay? Having said that, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was the heat. I'd be in it for 10, 15 minutes, and they'd pull the gloves off and pour sweat out. It would be full of sweat up to the wrist. I couldn't sit down in it, and they glued this down. So they would glue it down. They'd take it off with acetone. They put makeup on for Barry Allen. They take that off. They put the glue on. I was completely raw. Did I just say that we shouldn't whine about being... But the worst thing, the most interesting thing, we'll say, is that they couldn't clean them.
And this was before Febreze.
$100,000 worth of foam latex, and they couldn't clean them. But they had a solution, They sprayed them with Lysol and hung them up in my trailer, so they'd still be wet and sticky the next morning when I put it on. So, I broke out all over my back, but try not to think about that if you go back and you watch the show. So that was probably my least favorite thing. The most favorite thing was, having come from Broadway and soaps, was suddenly I felt like I had landed in Oz. It was the most expensive show Warner Brothers had ever done for television. It was the year that Burbank Studios was renamed Warner Brothers Studios. They had just repainted the water tower Warner Brothers Studios, so that when I came over Barham Boulevard and I would see that tower, and I knew I had a parking place on that lot. And I felt like I was in Wonderland, man. It was. I still am mindful of my good fortune, because I'm suffering under no illusions. There aren't many other guys that I grew up with in school who were better looking and just as talented as me. And so I'm very mindful of my good fortune to be even standing here and talking to you right now. Yes.
How you doing? Big fan. I was wondering if I'm sure everybody has seen the meme with the comparison of the eyes of yours and Zoom. I'm sure there's nothing you can say to that. Obviously, we're not looking for spoilers, but give me something.
Let me tell you a little story.
It's called a non-disclosure agreement.
I was on set doing an episode, and everybody was talking about this new show, Legends. And everybody knew the name of it on set. They had already shot some footage. We were talking about what it was all going to be about. So I left Vancouver to go to do a convention. And in the middle of it, I'm talking about this new show. It's called Legends. And so-and-so and so-and-so. Well, about an hour later, my phone started blowing up with Google alerts. Someone was videoing the Q&A.
Whoa.
And they put it on, and it was like, did John Wesley Shipp just inadvertently drop the name of the new superhero show? Well, right after that, my good friend Suzanne Gomez, CW Publicity, who was also publicity for Dawson's Creek, she's like, John, we haven't disclosed the name of the show. Could you cool it in your Q&A? I learned my lesson. I have to tell you, it's shocking. I'm looking at some of the things that they've come up with, and I'm going, wait a minute. What? We don't know yet. I got to tell you, the way they're writing it, we didn't know until a month before the season finale last year that Eddie was going to die. So we don't know. We don't. Last year.
You've had your time. You've had your time.
You're at a convention. You're at a panel with the Flash.
And as it
Watch
turned
the
out,
show.
And as it turned out, he didn't. So we were.
As John giveth, he taketh away.
All right. Can I ask you 2 questions? Yes, real quick. Okay. First one. Avoiding getting you in trouble. Are there any roles with the whole multiverse and anything like that or characters that you'd like to play? Should they approach you about that? And the second question is, from the first Flash show, were there any, aside from the costume, were there any props or pieces that you took when that show ended?
You know, I'll take the second one first. I was so ready to get out of that suit. 5 a.m., Mark Hamill and I were shooting the last scene of Flash 1991, Trial of the Trickster. As soon as we got, and they yelled, cut on that final take, I ripped the wings off and I threw them in the air in celebration. Well, Hamill almost lost his mind. He was like, what? No, where'd they go? Don't let him get away. He's crawling behind, you can see him doing it, right? He's crawling behind garbage cans and over cables, man. He got those wings. I don't know what I was thinking, but I think I was just so ready to be out of it that I didn't. He has those wings.
Oh, wow.
No, I think there maybe was the cappuccino machine they gave me for my trailer. I think I kept that.
Fair trade.
And then there was a really good question that you asked me, the first one.
If there was any other parts that
Oh, I've always wondered what's up with Henry Allen. What's up with Henry Allen? He hears about the man in the yellow suit, and he doesn't ask, what yellow suit? He hears about, I can go back and change the timeline, and he does it without hesitation. He says, don't. You can't. You mustn't. He comes back from having seen Nora's death. Henry never asks a single question. You know, I'm always hoping, my actor's soul is hoping that there's more to Henry Allen than meets the eye. And it certainly would fit into why he left. You know, it's amazing. You guys don't miss anything. I don't think that this is apropos of anything at all, except that I don't think it was intentional. But when Zoom apparently has a line to Barry about, when I go fishing with bait. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. And when Henry Allen comes back, where does he say he's been? Are we out of time?
Not yet.
No, we got
10 more minutes.
10 more minutes, yep.
Hi, darling.
Hi. Actually, kind of going off of that question, what you just said, I believe the park that you mentioned is actually the same park that you run into in the very first pilot episode of the original Flash. If I'm not mistaken, it's the same national park that Barry runs into the sign by the water, and he's like, "What the hell?" Yeah. That was the same park, right? I'm pretty sure that was the same name.
That we did the final shot.
No, in the when Henry is talking to Barry in the Grodd episode, and
Granite National Park.
that's the same park, I believe, from the pilot episode of your show.
They're amazing how many. I just saw Helen Slater. And I said, Helen, you know we're saying the same lines, right? And she said, what do you mean? I said, didn't you say to Melissa, you know, blue is you really look good in blue. I said, well, what did I say when Barry pulled the cow back? Well, you always did look good in red. So they're feeding us the same lines. The line that I said at the Trickster when I was tied up in the Trickster's lair, well, don't worry about whether, I wouldn't worry about that because if the cops can't find you, trust me, the Flash will. I said that in the pilot of 1990 to Lila in the interrogation room, those exact words. When Barry Allen can't get the centrifuge working and he hits it, and then he looks around and he takes the test tube out and vibrates it. Well, I'm watching that episode at home and I'm going, wait a minute, who directed this episode? It was David Nutter, who, before we shot a scene in the Flash pilot 2014, came up to me and said, you were my hero growing up. And I was like, David, you can't ask me to do a scene after you make a comment to me like that. Yes, sir.
After hearing about like how it was a pain wearing the outfit, my question is, does it still fit you?
You know, the last I heard is that half of one of those suits, brace yourself, was in a plexiglass case in a Planet Hollywood in Orlando, and I'm thinking, man, I hope it's hermetically sealed. That close to people's food? It's like... I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I did have another question, and it was well, you said that Henry is going to be coming back.
Yes.
I've always wanted to see Henry in a home setting, when he was at Joe's place, but I always wanted to see some more things from his younger days, and a lot of the set props that you had in the first season, the first series, I always loved whenever Barry was in his loft. And one of my favorite things was Earl. So if Henry comes back, do you think you could probably have a dog? Maybe name him Earl?
I would love that. You know, that was the best dog. His name was Dakai. And if you look at the Flash Forward episode of the first Flash series, when I return to Central City, and Earl runs up to me, and I'm delighted. I'm beating on the top of the thing. I'm whooping and hitting the car, and Dakai comes up, and I go, "Oh, Dakai!" And we were supposed to loop that. We were going to loop in, well, how are we going to fix that? So we were going to go, big guy. But we never did. So I'm glad, because it's a tribute to that dog. But you'll see me call him by his real name. Yeah, Dakai passed on. He was he was a great dog.
Hi, it's Gigi from yesterday. Yes. Yes, I'm cosplaying Caitlin, but yes. So yesterday I told you every scene with Henry just makes me cry. And I was just wondering, if Henry turns out to be Zoom, it's just so no. Just because you're a great actor, it's so heartfelt and emotional for me. When he left, I was just sobbing. But so after having played that side of Henry, if Henry does turn out to be someone like Zoom, would it make it more difficult for you to play that? Because I know you've done Psychopaths before, you were Zoom on the animated series, but just because of that foundation, would it be more difficult or more emotional?
It would make it easier. Listen, you hearing me, Andrew Kreisberg, Greg Berlanti? It would make it easier. If anyone's videoing this, no. You know what's funny, and I'll tell you an analogy. I was working with Malinois, I think they're Alsatian, attack dogs in France with Mark Harmon, and I were doing an anthology called The Visit. Ours was based on a story called The Dog in the Manger, and my character trained these very fierce attack dogs. And one of the scenes where I got to wear a vest and there was a ramp and the dog comes flying over the vest and lands onto my arm, and then it's like this, and I was like, man, I want to do that. Don't give that to the stunt man. So they said, okay, but don't move your fingers, But anyway, I just say that, and I say, well, how can you tell which ones to train? And they said, the friendliest, most lovable puppies are the ones that will have the fiercest attack. So I'm just carrying that around, in me, hoping to manifest that.
All right.
Yes. Am I ignoring a particular part of the room? Have I been over there? Excuse me. They're like, no, you haven't been over here, and none of us have our hands up. We're waiting for the next panel. Does anybody have a question? Question? Yes, sir.
The 1990 TV series had a dark approach, which was, I felt, influenced by the '89 movie with Keaton. Do you feel it was the wrong approach for the Flash, since he's not considered a traditionally dark character?
I think that's an excellent question, and it goes to the time that we were coming into. That was not done accidentally, and I'll tell you why. At that point, comics on television had been treated very lightly. Kerpow, blam, thawoom, all of which I wouldn't miss the original Batman series when I was a kid. You know what I mean? But we were coming out of a period where that was no longer considered cool, and we were trying to find a new way to tell these shows to signal to the audience that we were no longer writing them for kids, but that we were writing these stories. We were honoring the pop cultural art form, not writing down to it, but writing for an audience. Danny Bilson once said if he had his way, we'd be getting protest calls from PTAs all across the country, because we'd be so edgy. So did we take the Flash darker than the Flash traditionally is? Yes, but we felt we had to root it in an adult, gritty, serious telling. And I like to think that because we did that, the new version is freed up, to go back to its roots. I was always, when I watch Flash 1990, if ever I'm uncomfortable, I can tell it's in the suit. I never wanted to have dialogue in the suit. I never wanted, now, the trial of the trickster freed me, because once the trickster brainwashed me, I was no longer responsible for the fact that I could be goofy and do all these things. But if I could point to a real shortcoming in my portrayal, that would be it. Grant knows no such self-consciousness. He's jumping, he's running, he wears that suit like second skin, because 25 years later, nobody thinks anything about seeing someone cosplaying. Thank God. I mean, he's awesome. He's like, give me the dialogue, He's completely comfortable in his skin.
Unfortunately, we're going to only have time for one more question, John.
Okay, you pick. I can't do that.
Oh, okay then. Let's keep with this theme of that side. I got one hand over there.
Yes, sir.
Sure, make John walk all the way over there.
He's the fastest man alive.
So, all this Zoom stuff came after the scene where you acknowledged quietly that Henry knew that Barry was the Flash. Going to that, did you give it any thought to when Henry figured it out and what it was that clued him in that his son was the Flash?
It's interesting. There's a scene that never made it into the series, and there's a picture from it on my table. And it's when Joe had the heart attack. In the original version, Barry flashed around into the jail, got Henry out, who's a heart surgeon. Henry called for a defibrillator, and Barry turns to him and says, use these. And his hands are vibrating, and I jump-started Henry's heart. It was now, you guys didn't have the benefit of seeing that, but in my psychology, a father cannot hold his son's wrists and not know it's his son. So what I love I love that scene. So far, that's my favorite scene to date. And what I love about it, it's not only a good scene, it's good parenting, isn't it? He doesn't say, you're busted, you're the Flash, I know it's you. He teases it, he shows him the picture. He says, yeah, I guess Joe was lucky. Yeah, well, I guess I'm lucky too, huh? And then he says, well, because it's important for him to communicate some things to Barry, and he says, if the Flash were my son, I'd tell him a few things. I'd tell him it's a dangerous world, so be careful. I'd tell him that he's saving a lot of lives and he's a hero. But most of all, I would tell him that his father is proud of him. And what I love about that is he didn't pull Barry's covers. He didn't bust him. He opened the door a crack, like saying, my subtext was, son, when you're ready to walk through that door, I'm on the other side of it, and I'll be here. And he walked through it in the Trickster episode, when he saved me for the box of knives. And go back and watch the way Grant does this. He pulls the cow back, and I swear he transformed himself into a 12-year-old boy going, look what I can do. And that's when he walked through the door. Thank you so much for being wonderful.
John Wesley Shipp, everyone, please take the time. He's just like this no matter where he is. Thank you very much. Thank you.